I don't know if you've ever watched the genealogy-based TV show, Who Do You Think You Are? It's one of my favorites. If anyone who's seen that has seen a huge number of the guests, basically what they do is they'll find celebrities and they'll trace their family trees. And a huge number of the guests discover that personality traits and patterns that they see in their own parents and grandparents have been playing out for generations. Like, for example, maybe their grandparents in one of the lineages have a history of abandoning their families, or there might be violence or a criminal bent. And some folks first might think that this is passed on learned behavior, and we've sort of discussed this about being raised by somebody who does these things. But oftentimes it appears that the descendants didn't even know about the patterns because of estrangement, or perhaps they skipped a generation. And again, in my own lineage, there seems to be a weird thing about death or injury by fire or extreme heat. So how can we inherit personality traits, phobias, et cetera, in addition to disease from our ancestors, even if we didn't know them or their stories?
Yeah, and it is possible to have those energy patterns being passed along intergenerationally. And in research, one of the most interesting things is people with PTSD. And for example, there have been cases where somebody was acting as though they'd been traumatized and they never had been traumatized. And when they were examined epigenetically, they had the same epigenetic markers as somebody who'd been severely traumatized, like a Holocaust victim, someone in the Holocaust in World War II. And there have been a few instances now where people have been had these extreme, unexplainable PTSD reactions. And then when they go back 2 generations, they discover their grandmother or their grandfather or someone in their lineage was in the Holocaust and they didn't even know about it. So, because everyone was quiet about that in the family. So it's interesting that epigenetically these tags get passed along. Now that's on the physical level. In my book, Mind to Matter, I talk about the energy level and the energy spectrum. And energetically, things get passed along as well. We don't live in isolation. There are things called thought fields I talk about in Mind to Matter, and there's something around the Earth, like you have this beautiful image of a planet behind you. In one of the illustrations in Mind to Matter, I have that same image, but then a layer around that, and it's not the stratosphere, it's not the ionosphere, it's not the atmosphere, it is the psychosphere. And the psychosphere is a term coined in the 1950s, and what it designates is all the thoughts and feelings in human beings all over the planet. And there are those thoughts and feelings. Sometimes you feel thought fields going through you of anger, of jealousy, of rage, of outrage, of upset, whatever it might be. And there are thought fields that move through you. One of my favorite examples is from Eckhart Tolle. He talks about the pain body, how people have a pain body. Sometimes people walk into my live workshops and I can feel that pain body, or they'll volunteer for a session in front of the whole class at a live workshop. They'll sit down there and I can literally feel it like a presence in the room. And sometimes people who are gifted and see energies, they can literally see that pain body. And the beautiful thing is that as we tap, as we do acupressure, as we meditate, we can see people release that pain body. I had a really crazy one of these in a recent workshop. There was a woman in this workshop, and she'd been in a previous workshop 2 or 3 years ago. She'd also been worked on for a whole bunch of physical issues by other energy healers, and no one had ever been able to budge these energy patterns. And so I knew she'd been in a previous workshop of mine. I'd worked with her. She really hadn't made much progress there or in the intervening 2 or 3 years. And I said to her, let's just imagine that this is a thought field. Just play along with me. Just go along with this. And she said, Dawson, I believe it is a thought field. And I said to her, now, I had this really weird visual image. And I, as I looked down at her acupuncture points, it looked to me as though this thought field of all of these physical symptoms she couldn't budge, this depression, this anxiety, all of these intergenerational patterns from her parents and her grandparents, it looked to me as though they were anchored in her body. That thought field was attached to her body at a certain acupuncture point. And that point is called K1. K1 is right in the middle of the ball of your foot. And that's where K1 is. And as I looked at her, I don't know how I got this hit intuitively, but I sensed that it was there at K1. And I said to her, if this was a thought field, where might it be attached to your body? And she closed her eyes and tuned in. She lifted up her foot and she pointed right at K1. So at that point we said, okay, conventional psychology has not been able to help you with this stuff. Energy healing hasn't been able to help you with this stuff. Let's pretend this is a thought field, and let's see if we can release it from the anchor point, and tapping on that one point, let's see what happens. We used EFT. We tapped on that one point. We tapped on every conceivable permutation of language that might be applicable to releasing it from K1. And as she tapped, and as she then came back to reality and opened her eyes, she looked like a whole different person. People in the room said, wow, your face has changed. Your whole body is more relaxed. Your body's freed up. It's like that energy isn't with you anymore. And she said, yeah, I felt as I tapped, did the acupressure, she said, I felt as though the whole pattern just drifted away. That thought field detached from my foot, and it just drifted off into the psychosphere. That's the power of these energy therapies. We can release things. We can release the pain body in a way in which we cannot do with any other conventional treatment. Don't go to your doctor and tell her to try and help you with the pain body. She can't. She can help you with a regular medical diagnosis, but don't bring energy things and emotional things to conventional medicine, and don't try and deal with conventional things like a broken bone. If you have a broken bone, go to your doctor. See, we need the best of both worlds. We need the best of conventional therapies. We need the best of energy medicine. But energy therapies can heal those ancestral patterns in the psychosphere, in the ancestral imprint we carry forward from the past in a way in which conventional therapies just can't touch.
Right. Yeah. And I've witnessed this happening. I've taken your courses with the Shift Network, and I've seen you working with people, and I've watched that kind of thing happen. Gosh, I'm looking at the clock here. We're running a little low on time, but before we close, would you maybe share some final suggestions for our viewers to use to make changes in their own lives?
Because one of the things that I'm struck with as I work with people in live workshops and teleseminars, and I share this in my books as well, is that, and I want you, as you listen to this, to really get this. If you don't get or remember anything else I said, please remember this. You deserve a wonderful life. You deserve a life of love and happiness and joy and ease. You truly do. Because I have grandkids. I watch these grandkids. I watch my kids being born. I watch grandkids, and they just are full of happiness and play and laughter. And what happens to crush that in us? All kinds of things happen to shut down our joy. By the time we're 30 and 40 and 50 years old, we aren't playing, we aren't loving from the heart in the same way we were when we were 1 or 2 or 3. So when people sit down with me and tell me their stories in live workshops, I often think this person has this limited story of pain or limitation, or things they believe they cannot do in their life, or ways they cannot be great, cannot be free. And I want to tell you, as you're listening to this, almost all those beliefs you have about the way your life is are lies. They're lies. They're lies told to you by adults when you were small. They're the stories of your tribe passed along from generation to generation as truths, and they aren't true. So people wind up with all these core beliefs about, I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy enough, I don't deserve this love, I don't deserve money, I don't deserve touch and passion and goodness and kindness, and well, maybe I deserve a little bit of it, but surely not huge amounts of love. So I want to challenge you, and I want to say that almost every belief you have about being small, playing small, giving small, or receiving small is a lie. It's a lie that's been passed down generation to generation, well-intentioned, trying to keep you safe, trying to keep you having huge expectations that get disappointed, but nonetheless, it's a lie. And when you tap that away, things change. Lisa, my life didn't begin to change this way until I was 45 years old. I divided my life into 3 eras. 0 to 15 was getting a mountain of dung dumped on me. 15 to 45 was going to therapy and reading books and spiritual teachers and classes, trying to dig out from under the mountain. And 45 was when I began to live. 45, I dug myself out far enough where I began to meditate every day. I discovered EFT. Everything began to change. And my life changed radically when I quit believing all the rubbish I'd been told early on in my life. So I want you, as you're listening to this, to question every belief you have about your body, about how happy you deserve to be, how much love you deserve to have in your relationships, how much love you deserve to have in your life, how much abundance you deserve. You deserve a loving, abundant, happy life. But there's only one thing you have to do to get that. In my book, Mind to Matter, I talk about this, a dream I had at the end of the book. I share this at the very end of the book, but a dream I had. And it had, in my dream, the dream ended with this big, like, gateway, and it said on top, Happy Land. And so you could go into Happy Land. You were allowed to go into Happy Land at the end of the dream, except that there was a turnstile at the very beginning of the journey, and you couldn't get into Happy Land without going through the turnstile. And to get through the turnstile, you needed a ticket. And you weren't allowed to go through the turnstile into Happy Land without putting a ticket in the turnstile to get through. And that ticket was your suffering. You had to give up your suffering, all of it, to go through the turnstile to get into Happy Land. And that's what you have to do. You have to, the price of this is to give up everything you've thought you've known about who you are, how the world is, how people are. You have to give it all up. And if you put that ticket into the turnstile, you get to go to Happy Land. So that's that's why I'm so passionate about this, why I write, why I'm doing the summit, why I do other work, why I teach live classes. I have a passion for seeing people give up their suffering, because you can't cling to your suffering and get into Happy Land. You have to give it up. And that's what I want you to do. That's what I most want for you, is to stick your suffering ticket into that turnstile and go through into Happy Land and discover that you can live a life of freedom and bliss, and that's what you deserve. That's what you were born to do when you were 1 years of age. You knew how to do that. I want you now, whether you're 15 or 50 or 75 or 92, to give up your suffering, go to Happy Land. Join me there. It's way more fun than the other place. I promise.
It's a dream that literally can come true. Beautiful. Wow. Well, thank you for this fascinating conversation. And thank you so much, Dawson, for sharing your time and your expertise. I so appreciate you.
Every blessing. And again, I look forward to seeing you on the other side of the turnstile.
I'll see you there.